What's good, YouTube, man? We're back with another video. Today, we're reviewing Tubby Hero X. So I recently just got done binge watching it. I had started watching it like probably like when it was after it finished its first arc. It was going to its second character arc, and then I was just like, this is gonna be one of the ones that I feel like it's better to just binge instead of just waiting week to week. And boy, was I right? Because man, if I had to watch this shit week to week, I'd have been fucking pissed. Um, but nevertheless, get into it, man. So, if you're not familiar with To Be Hero X, and if you're not, if you're in, if you are familiar with just like the standard like trope of anime of you have a main character, and then you have the plot, and then we follow the main character going through the main plot, and you might have like subplots here and there. That is not the case with To Be Hero X. There is essentially no main character. There kind of is if you kind of want to like if you want to like look really deep at it and like put this person as the main character, but you don't really deal with them until the very end. But this show is very different. Um, it is a Chinese anime, right? And I'll just come out straight and say it. I watch this in dub because a lot of people be like, "Oh, dub's bad. Sub's better." It's like, yeah, there's some things I watch in the sub, but then there's other things I watch in the dub because I need to do other things. I like multitasking. I like doing something else, doing something, and then being able to watch on the other monitor. You know what I'm saying? So everything that I'm gonna say is gonna be in the dub. And if names are different, or if like what they call something different is different, obviously for the sub, do your best to understand. But we start off. The story goes in character arc, and you have these things called the top 10 heroes. And the thing what the heroes are is like they have this thing called the trust value system, which basically like you have fans, and the more fans you have gives you more power. Obviously, the more power you are, the higher rank you go. And essentially like just social media giving you power. And I kind of like that play on it because a lot of people in the real world view somebody as like Mr. Beast, for example. You see Mr. Beast as is like the most popular person in the streaming, not the streaming atmosphere, but like in the social media aspect. It has so many subscribers and followers and stuff like that. But if Mr. Beast were to be in this world, he would probably be like the number one hero, right? Because he would have that. But there's a little wrench into it all because sometimes the characters jump without it actually really showing how they go up, like in the fan, database, fan system. And there are times where like, you can basically just kill somebody else in the top 10 and you can be outside the top 10 and just jump in. So, and we got a perfect example of that. I cover that a little bit later. But the system itself has a little bit of flaws. But I do feel like they do a good job of like sticking to the system. There's not really too many issues. But so we have 10 a top 10, like I said. This is going to revolve around these 10 characters are going to be the main like 10 focal points of the series. Outside of like a couple people that are going to be on the outside, which are new players that come into the top 10. It's still these main characters that we care about are still going to end up in the top 10. So we start off with the hero Nice. So Nice, it gives you more of like a Superman-esque type of power. And mind you, all these characters have different type of like powers and niches and stuff like that. So, but Nice gives you like this Superman type of like perfectionist appearance, right? And what happens is like at the very beginning, we're following this kid that's like a art designer, basically. Like he crafts like the ad promotions for the hero Nice. Well, one day he walks, he's like out and about, and he sees Nice, and Nice commits suicide. And when he does this, the way the balance of like the top 10 is and the fan thing is, they care so much about this shit that him suiciding had to get covered up. So they took this one kid that was just a promotion, an ad promotion person, what they did is they literally like changed his hair, touched up his face a little bit, and they literally made him pose as nice. And the way the hero system works, like I said, is that if you get the fans, you get the power. And that's kind of what happened. Is they morphed this kid into nice, and basically he got their fans. He got nice's fans, so therefore he got power. And he goes through his old trials and tribulations. And for the most part, his arc is pretty good. You get to see him like battle, like becoming a new hero, right? It's still a dream of his, right? But then he slowly gets to find out that being a hero in this world isn't all it's cracked up to be, because it's more political than it is actually about just doing the right thing and saving people's lives and stuff like that. There's always like, oh, is this gonna hurt my image? Is this gonna benefit my image? Stuff like that. So for the most part, there was no real big issue with the first arc, I'd say. And this is where it's gonna throw people through a loop. I think it's about 4 episodes. The first arc is, and it's gonna end off on a cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger is really hit you because, and then just this like kind of a slight spoiler, you're not gonna get a resolution to that cliffhanger throughout this entire season. You won't get. And so we start to hop into the next character arc. And the one thing this show does, and a lot of shows do this sometimes too, where they jump around the timelines. And they don't really show it. They kind of do, though. They kind of tell you, they'll be like, hey, it's X amount of years after the commission. And the commission is basically the hero system. The hero system was founded. I think the latest we go was like 41 or 42 years after commission. So whatever the case is, we get into this next hero, which is Ethel. If I had to relate Ethel to a superhero, he'd be kind of like not Superman, Batman, but not as like gadgety. He still relies on gadgets, but he's not as like technical on gadgets. So kind of like whatever. He can use the powers of lightning, but it's kind of like electricity more so. Really, like he kind of generates through the suit, but he shows examples of pulling the lightning from the sky. But that's who this main character revolves around. But the difference is, just like the first one, is there was 2 Nices, but the first one committed suicide, so then that guy had to take over Nice's role. But the Ethel one's completely different. So we following this other character where he's just a regular, like he's like a performer, like an entertainer. And apparently it's like a popular thing where like Ethel is like the name of the character, the name of the hero. He has like plenty of numerous like performers that are like, emulating him. That would like do little real stand-up performances and whatnot. And the weird thing about it is like they're having these Ethels kind of perform, and then they kind of like test them and see like, hey, does this person have what it's like to be in the next Ethel? And the thing with Ethel is like he's always got a mask on, so I think it makes it easier to just transfer Ethel to the next person. Whereas like all the other heroes, their identity is out there, so it's not something you can really just like change the drop of a hat. But we basically go down this road where Ethel, we refer to as the old Ethel, and then we got this new kid, which basically ends up being the new Ethel. So this arc was overall pretty good up until the very end. The very end didn't really make much sense because there's gonna be spoilers. So if you don't want to listen to it, then just skip this section. But what happens is basically that old Ethel and new Ethel, they combat. They get into a conflict with each other because new Ethel thinks that old Ethel was the one that put the hit out on him, but the hit ended up getting the dude's friend. And so basically they have like a revenge match, whatever. And what happens is the new Ethel wins, right? But after that, it's like he becomes like a mindless puppet for his uncle, which I don't even know if that's actually his uncle. They don't really, they say it's his uncle, but he's just also like an organization head. And just to backtrack, we have these like organization heads. We don't really learn too much about them to like the midway part of the series. like you have like MG and Doge or Dodge or something like that. It's just like different, basically a different company, like different. Think of it like an entertainment brand. Okay, you got Nike here, you got Adidas here, you got Reebok there, stuff like that, and superstars, which are the heroes, sign underneath them, and they represent them. So the guy that was in charge of ESOL was basically this kid, the new ESOL's uncle, but was posing as like a regular, just like a shop clerk, and just like giving him advice and whatnot like that. And at the very end, it's revealed that he was actually the head, and he was just like grooming his, I assume, nephew to be the next ESOL. But the weird thing is, later on, he basically just becomes hollow. He's not really speaking. He does speak, right? But he doesn't really have like any moral compass like he had before. And a lot of people will point it to, when I was looking it up and see how other people's thoughts on it is, people think it's because, oh, he hesitated when he could have saved his friend back then. Now he has this new ambition to never hesitate. Well, that doesn't really explain why the guy has no more moral compass. He was sent on a mission to go kill another hero later on, and he just doesn't question it. There's no talking it out with the other hero. There's no nothing. It's just, oh, this guy said go kill you, I'm gonna go kill you. You know what I'm saying? So, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But overall, this arc was good until the very end, and that's when I didn't really have too much. I didn't really too much like it or not. All right, next we got Lady Scion. This one's a little bit different from pretty much everyone else on the list outside of one other person, but they're not really a combatant. They are, but they aren't. Like I said, with thanks to the hero system, they are able to like fight, but their power is a little bit different. If I had to think about a hero comparison, I couldn't even give you one. I could not even give you one if I tried. She is basically a pop star. She is a pop star who her ability is basically just being lucky. And like when she's first shown to us, she literally is like a baby. She is on a tragic plane crash that she was the sole survivor. And basically it's shown that everywhere she goes, yeah, she gives them luck, but when she leaves, brings misfortune to them. And it's just like they're trying to use a theme of like, oh, she's absorbing the good luck from everybody else around them, so therefore they have misfortune while she has all their good luck. It's kind of a stretch the way the theme does it, but they kind of like abandon that theme later on, whenever she's part of the Hero Association. But I actually really like this arc though. There was no real complaints from me. Um, Music was really cool. It was really upbeat and like refreshing to hear. And for the most part, the hero she becomes pretty cool. It's just the only thing that's really weird about it is like she's not really a combatant in that sense. So her like place in the story is kind of like iffy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what are you really like doing outside of like being a pop star? And I was like, you have fans, but like you're not really a fighter. You're more like she could be really seen like more as a support character. But yeah, I didn't have too much to say about her arc. I'll move into the next one, which is Queen's arc. And might I add, from Lady Scion to onward, all these characters kind of all mesh and start like this is where the timeline starts like becoming like consistent. The first two arcs, they were like cutaway arcs in like different timelines, right? They're still a part of the same universe, right? But it's just like one happened like in this year, the other one happened like 3 years ago or before or future. But the Lady Scion into Queen. So Queen is basically like she's I know the hero that I'm thinking about, but I can't think of her name. Well, she's not a female. She's it's a DC character. He has like he can like kind of freeze stuff in time, like in time and stuff like that. can't think of his name, but that's kind of the way she has her powers, and she's basically like she can dictate a space and say like, "Hey, nobody's gonna move within this inside this little area," and it's a cool little ability. Like, and the animation for her abilities are really cool. Um, she's seen as a genius. Like she's like super young, graduates, and has very high expectations. And one of her core motives is like she wants to abolish the current hero system. She doesn't like this whole commission of like you know ranking people off their fans and then the fans give them power and stuff like that. She doesn't like it. So that's her like main goal. But her arc is really interesting because we get introduced to a. This is where it gets a little weird with the timeline and stuff like that. So we get introduced to her arc via somebody else. So we get the appearance. We follow this one female chick called Boa, and Boa is seen fight. So they have in the top 10 they have these random like ranking matches where they fight each other, and once a year, and like the winner of it all ends up becoming number one X, basically Hero X, and that's the only thing about the top 10. It's like your top 10 ranking is based off your fans, but to become Hero X number one, it's not about who has the most fans. It's just about who wins in those tournaments. And therefore, if they're winning in the tournament, they're gaining fans as well. So it kind of works in that way as well. But just to get into that spot, you still have to be able to beat everybody else in the top 10, which is kind of cool, in my opinion, right? We're all top 10. We're all in the top 10, but like, hey, number one beat all of us, and that's the reason he's up there or she's up there. But we start off with this Boa girl, and she's more like an Amazon type, but she can fly too, so it's a little bit different. But she's more like an Amazon type fighter, has like a big battle axe, and she's fighting the current Hero X, which is Smile, and they get into a fight, and she ends up winning. Good little fight, good little animation, and she becomes Hero X. So she's the first female Hero X, and then it shifts to Queen and Boa, or they're under the same organization. They're under the same brand, and they're just sitting there talking. And basically, the commissioner of that brand, the CEO of that brand, is sitting there talking to them, and he's just praising Queen. He has Hero X in the other seat, and he's not praising her. He's praising Queen. And so this starts to spark like little animosity, from Boa to Queen. Queen doesn't have any feeling ill will to Boa, but because she's Boa's viewing her as like the spoiled, riding genius that was given everything, right? Whereas Boa is like viewed as like a, oh, I had to grind for this shit. You know what I'm saying? I had to grind. I had to put in work. Whereas you're just getting it handed to you. But we go through that arc, and it's all in all, the Queen is a really good character because she's level headed and she thinks about. She's very intellectual on things, but to see her arc was probably the best because like not the best at the time, I should say, the best at the time because you were able to start seeing everything start put together. It's like it's you see her timeline looping with Lucky Scion, and then Little Johnny, Big Johnny, and so see that, and then you get to see the first appearance of the white-haired Hero X, that pretty much the hero, number one hero for about from the midway point to the very end story, end of this season, I should say. But her arc, though, overall, the only problem I really had was I felt like the character Boa was a extreme plot convenience character because so what happened was is Boa and Queen had the idea that they were going to run into each other with the in the ranking match. Well, that didn't happen. It didn't show us the Boa's fight. We didn't. It didn't show us Boa's fight, but it showed Queen getting ready to come out, and she thought she was about to be fighting Boa, right? But no, she came out and she fought. She was fighting Hero X, or the soon to be Hero X. And she loses. Pretty much just like a perception dip. Like she walks out and she's about to get into a fight. They start it. Next thing you know, she wakes up. She's knocked out. She's waking up from being knocked out. So you would think, okay, Boa and Queen and all them, they'll be mad at Hero X, right? No, you thought wrong. Boa is still mad at Queen, and she seems like the media, because the media is a really big part in this. The media is like saying, "Oh, Queen was trying to get luck from Lucky Scion. That's why Boa probably lost." But that doesn't make any sense because Boa and Queen didn't fight. So how would the luck affect them, right? And Queen ended up losing anyway. So where again was the luck, right? Um, and then if anything, Boa should have been mad at X, but she wasn't, and she just flies off the hinges, goes crazy, and attacks Queen. And I felt like that was very plot convenience, like just forced down our throats to say, "Hey, we're just giving you a character that Queen can demonstrate on and like have like a cool fight." Their fight was probably the best fight in the entire season. Like it's from pure animation, from just fight sequence, everything. It's just like, man, it was really good. It was really good. Really recommend it. So we get done with that, and this is where it starts to become a little sketch. So we go on to Ghostblade, right? We go on to Ghostblade, and Ghostblade is one of the weirder characters because, well, back that up. We have Lolly first. So this is where like, so you saw how, like I said, Queen and Lucky were tied together. Well, these next three actually are all tied together as well, but they're just like, it's just happening in a different location. It's the same timeline, happening in a different location. So we have Lolly, which is kind of like a young cat girl, but with like a mech suit type of deal. And her arc, I would say, is probably the second weakest in my opinion, because, and the only reason I judge it that way is probably because she relies on the piggybacking of the other two characters in her like atmosphere of like arc, right? So you have Lolly, which she's basically like the daughter of the head researcher of like this, like the research department for the whole like system, right? And she makes friends with this one girl who ends up being the daughter of Ghostblade, which is another top 10 hero, but they don't know that they're related. But it's kind of hard judging the arcs separately when they're actually so interwoven. So I'll just leave it at like her character is cool in this fact of like she really tries so hard because she's kind of like how Boa was, except she's not as like she's not as like brutish, right? She's like she sees herself as a female, but she wants to be strong. She wants to be able to produce for herself. She wants to be a hero. She wants to save people and stuff like that. Um, but she doesn't do it like in she doesn't she's not just like mad at the world, right? So, but moving on to that, and we have Ghostblade. So Ghostblade, I would say, probably was the best character arc in my opinion, like from start to finish. Ghostblade is seen when we first see him. He's kind of like he's just like a quiet assassin type top 10 character that we're just like, he's just doing the bidding of the CEO of his company. But then it's later found out that, hey, this guy, he got a family, right? And obviously I told you the girl ends up being his daughter, and he ends up like stalking her. He's like stalking her because he's not in her life, and she doesn't even know who he is. He's stalking her because he wants to get to know her, and he's kind of like a mute. He can't speak, right? Like the way he just can't speak. Um, so he's stalking her, and it's just funny watching it because like he's stalking her, and then the girl notices she's getting stalked, and she starts running, and so then he's like, "Oh, is somebody stalking her?" And starts looking around and starts like following after her and stuff like that. And then that's where Lolly and him cross paths because Lolly jumps in trying to save her friend from the guy that she thinks is a stalker. And then finally, when Ghostplay realizes this is just a kid. Oh shit, let me leave. I think they're friends. So, and then they ended up getting on a mission together, and you get to just see like the human side of him, and like out of all of the heroes that you see, like he's done terrible shit, right? But he's not as like twisted, and he doesn't care about the rank system and stuff like that. Probably the least out of anybody out of the thing, right? Esau was kind of like that too, but Esau was, like I said, he was kind of just like, he was a mindless puppet, and you could say that Ghostblade was kind of like that as well. But at least Ghostblade, you actually, even when he was in like the thick of it, you still got to see him like think about things and like question it, stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But it's just like one of those things where you're like, man, where was this for Esau? Right? Esau could have been like this. And we might still get that in season 2. We might get a different Esau. But all in all, Ghostblade's arc was definitely the best. And then you get into the third piece of the trifecta of their arc, Little Johnny, Big Johnny. Little Johnny being like a human, and they call him Big Johnny like a little alien cat. So the way all this, I like the way how all this links up is because this character is seen as like the happy-go-lucky. He's like bringing people together, but he's super annoying because he's super pushy, and everybody knows one of those type of people that like they're super fucking pushy. And you're like, damn, I won't shut up. You know what I'm saying? But he's very upbeat, but we get to find out that his mom died when he was young, and his dad was a top 10 hero. And they were in the tower, and the mom dies. So the dad was like, "Well, I need to be a parent, so I'm retiring this hero life." And they go live out in the cabin in the woods. And the current ex comes to visit him, and I guess he's trying to get the him to help him because he's got a ranking match that's coming up. But Little Johnny's dad says, "Nah, I'm good. I'm retired." Blah blah blah. Well, whatever the case is, we don't see who gets to call the hit on, who calls the hit in, but we know who it most likely is. And they call Ghostblade in. And this is where everything starts to get mushed together. They call Ghostblade in, and he basically assassinates Little Johnny's dad when Little Johnny's not there. And this is where it's like, damn, this shit is deep, man. And it's just like you get to see Little Johnny, like you get to find out like, hey, even though his life has not been great and he had to suffer, but he's still like smiling and like helping push people through and stuff like that. And the cool thing about this is like you get to see like the when you're watching one character's arc, you get to hear their inner monologue, their inner thought, right? And you don't get to hear the other person. But then when you get to the other person's arc, you get to hear their monologues. There was like one instance where they're in the car together, right? Little Johnny and Ghostblade are in the car together. Ghostblade is the first arc you hear, and he's just like, "Oh my god, this guy's so fucking annoying. How can I do to shut him up? How can I shut him up?" And he's just like, "Oh, this won't shut him up. Maybe this will shut him up. Maybe that'll shut him up." And then when you got the Little Johnny's arc, it's just like Little Johnny's like, "Damn, that didn't get him to talk. Man, that didn't get him to talk. Damn, does this guy? Oh man, this guy actually really caring though. You know what I'm saying?" But he still believes some of the stuff that's in his like some of the stuff he says, right? But he's still like, he's doubting himself to become friends with the guy in his own head as well. But he doesn't let it be known. But we get done with that, and this is where it gets really sketchy, in my opinion, right? So we get Dragon Boy, which is the next character. Um, but just to clarify, from that 3 character arc, I said Ghostblade was the most interesting character out of all of them, but that 3 character arc was the best arc in the show for the season 1. That was the best arc, right? That whole little sequence of events, everything tying together, that was the best. Granted, this entire season all ties together in some type of way, but that one felt the most coherent and tied together, and it was really cool. But the next arc the next character with being Dragon Boy, I had problems with this guy. And I don't think it was too much of an issue per se, really, with the fact that he was like a bad character or anything like that. But I think the fact that he was not really very interesting as a character. Like he didn't have really much talk. He doesn't really give you much dialogue on like, hey, this is my view on the world. Hey, this is what I want to do, right? He's just thrust into here as like he's just a fucking tank and he just wants to fight people and kill them and take top spots and stuff like that. Which is fine to have a character like that, but it's just like, hey, you just gotta accept that. Hey, this guy's more on the shallow end of characters list that we have. Now, my big issue with it is I hate these fucking characters where like they take damage and they're able to absorb it and give it back out stronger. Like I hate those type of characters because it's such a fine line because what ends up being happening is like there's only like two ways to actually beat them. One of the ways is they just overload them, right? And you see that with like Dragon Ball. Like in Dragon Ball, you saw the guy on Bobby's spaceship where Goku basically just like fed him so much Super Saiyan power that he just blew up. And then we also see it in GT where Super 17 he just takes so much energy that he couldn't take anymore. But with this Dragon Boy guy, he goes after the the longest reigning like top 10 hero in Smile. And we brought up Smile earlier when he fought Boa. But he goes after him, and this kid should really be getting his ass whooped, and he does get his ass whooped. He gets his ass like he doesn't put up a good fight whatsoever for like a good chunk of the fight. But because of the way his power works, it's just the more damage he takes, he's able to just like say, "Oh shit, I'm not done. All right, take it back." You know what I'm saying? And I feel like those characters are so annoying because it's like, okay, well, this we have to just come up with this imaginary like X amount of force to get rid of this character or to like overpower their absorption. And I feel like that's just such a cop out way because there's no real good way to tell how much is like too much to where they can't absorb it. So, and the other second way that people usually do this is like they usually beat them by like, okay, they can absorb physical attacks. Well, what are they going to do with the internal attacks? Well, they try that method and they let us know that internal attacks don't work either. And so Nice shows up. The first Nice before this is in the past before he commits suicide. Um, Nice sticks him with this vial of fear, and fear is like the looming antagonist that's basically the anti of the trust value system, and he sticks that into Dragon Boy, and Dragon Boy is like in pain. He falls on the ground, act like you're thinking, oh shit, he's gonna transform into like a fear beast, and we'll have to get rid of him. Nope, he's just like damn. Well, my power lets me just take any damage, and I can just send it back out twofold, and he just spits it out. It gets on Smile, and then turns into a fear beast, and it's just like, oh man. So okay, then how do we get rid of the guy? How do we beat the dragon guy? And then Smile goes berserk because he's a fear beast. Smile he like knocks out Nice, and then Smile goes after Dragon. And this is another thing that pisses me off, right? Is when characters get backstories to like further power them up, but the backstories are so shallow that it doesn't offer anything to the actual story, right? It doesn't make you like the character any more, any less. It just gives you like an example of, yeah, this is why they're OP, or this is an example of them being OP from back in their past. And so Fear Smile, I should say, Fear Smile is beating his ass, and then he goes to start choking him out. And it shows you like the dragon guy struggling to breathe as he's getting his like lungs or his neck choked out and whatnot. And you're thinking, oh, finally. And this is one of the ones where I'm like, yeah, let's get him out of here, right? Because he's a menace. But it shows you a flashback of him as a kid, and I guess like whoever was like trying to train him as a kid, they had him underneath ice water, and he was just like choking underwater. And they were like, "Come on, you can get up, you can get out of here." And he's like banging on the ice, can't get out, and he's like losing breath. Eventually, just like he passes out and falls back. And then the humans walk away, and they're like, "He was a fucking disappointment, worthless trash," and they just walk away. And that just like triggers Dragon, and he just like breaks the ice and then jumps out and shows him walking with the ice coming down. And then it flashes back to him getting choked out and him just getting a rage boost for no reason, by the way. It's just because he had a flashback of when he was called worthless trash. So therefore, and then you show later on, or he's like getting choked out by a person. He turned a great person into a fear beast that was choking him out, and he decided, "Oh, this guy's worthless trash. Let me get a power boost, and and then eventually he goes on to one shot him." And this is just where I'm just like, bro, what are we doing, bro? It's just like, I get it. Like you want to have like the edgy guy that's in the main cast, but it's just like you can handle it better. You could have gave a better backstory, and there's still chances for in season 2 to give a little bit more dialogue, but his like dialogue is so bad. Very like least interesting, probably the second least interesting character, I should say. There's one character that's least worse than him, and I haven't got to him. That was a rant. I did not like that guy. But the next guy is the person that I said is the worst, and sadly, I don't want him to be the worst because he's a dog. Yes, you heard me. We have a dog superhero, and he's not like Crypto. He's not flying around. You know what I'm saying? Um, but he's kind of like he's a super dog, but he's not a super dog. Like, and it's just his episode was probably probably the weakest, like start to finish. It was a cool little thing where they had his backstory of him being like he started off as a circus dog, and he bit somebody because he was like tired of all the people like treating him like a fucking circus animal, and he bit the people. Then he got thrown to the pound. Then this little girl came in, spotted him, and immediately fell in love with him, took him out, and then just started showing him, the good life, and he started like caring about it. And then eventually, the little girl and her folks' houses were gonna get, like repossessed, taken over, whatever. And so they go on this little adventure, try and get the deeds back and stuff like that. And that's where they meet the fear soldiers that were made in one of the earlier episodes. And basically, he ends up like the girl ends up cheering him on so much that he gets like one hero or he gets one follower. So he becomes like a part of the hero system at that point. And the only reason he actually ends up making out is because Hero X was around at the time and he was helping him. And I think that's the only redeeming quality of this episode is it meshes Hero X, like you get to see him actually doing more shit. But yeah, not a super fan of him as a character, and his little mini chapter episode arc was kind of like meh. Then we move on to the last episode, which was, man, you really wish there was more because they went, like I said, Queen and Boa had the best like like pure fight. But as far as like just flexing fucking animations, like graphical animations on the screen, it's this last episode. Is basically what's his name? X. Actually, you get to see him. You get to see him like because he has basically two modes. Like he has like his normal civilian like goes to work, and he's like a black haired typical looking like business worker. And then he has this X persona where he's like the white slick hair back with the glasses and whatnot. And you get to see both those sides. And this is the day before they're having a ranking match. And here's the thing, apparently if this ranking match goes on and he wins, he would have been four straight. And nobody's ever done that. And what the commissioner system is, they're scared because if your fanhood starts to get up too high, you can rival that of a god, and therefore the god can sometimes just say, "Hey, tired of this system." It can challenge the system. And the other thing that's really annoying to them is that X is not a part of any of the league, any of the commission like organizations. He's a freelance just hero by himself. And so that they want to get that under wraps. They want to make it so he doesn't make it to that hero, like that ranking match. So we get to see the dog show up again, but then also random ass fear soldiers and other heroes like lower rank heroes like in like the top like 15, 16 shit like that show up, because the top 10 are banned from fighting. So you don't want to obviously show up with the top 10. But if like a 15 hero shows up trying to fight, then it's like they kind of got plausible deniability at that point. But we get to see like great. Basically, X's powers is kind of like reality warping, where he's able to go from like the 2D world to 3D world, just like bounce around, teleport and shit like that. And it's really cool, really, really fucking cool. Don't really know how you fight it, because he can literally throw you another dimension and just sit there. Like he literally, like the first time the dog shows up, he literally throws the dog in the third dimension and just has him sitting there on the wall, just running around for fucking like 10 minutes straight, just while he's just sitting there, just on the couch drinking a drink. So it's just like he can kind of just trap you there, but you go through this whole little fight animation, and at the very end, the dog's running around with them, and then X is like, "Oh, well, let me finally clue you in a little bit of like what's going on," and you kind of get the inner workings of like how bad the commissioner system is, and how they're like actually been orchestrating all this type of stuff. How being a hero really isn't like the way they want it to be, isn't really the way it needs. And basically, him saying that people have been controlling the strings, and he labels it as fate, but he's gonna go against it. And so they end the arc at the ranking match. The only thing that was kind of weird to me is at the end is we see the we see the new Nice, and we see the old one. But the old one, which should have been committed suicide, right, has like a giant crack through him. A lot of people are like theorizing that it was a fear recreated, like resurrected Nice, which is a little weird to see, but obviously we'll get more on it in season 2. But all in all, man, long-winded like review. The series, I'd say I'd give it a solid like 8 out of 10 if I had to judge it. It was really good. It wasn't like, it had some moments where it was like, this ain't really like, this kind of like extra, or didn't make too much sense. But all in all, it was a very good watch, very good binge. I think it's way better on a binge because everything starts to flow a lot better. And it started pulling at your pulling at your emotional like strings a little bit, especially during like the Ghostblade portion. Like you were really like rooting for these people, you know what I'm saying? But all in all, man, really good show. Really recommend it. If you watched it already and you sat through this review, let me know what you think about the show. And if you plan on watching it, let me know what you think after you watch it. Like, comment, subscribe. See y'all later. Peace.